Good evening once again, all my comic collecting friends out there in YouTube land. Comic Order 410 here to do my video for the mainstream comics tag. And I was recently tagged by two great YouTubers, Carlos Infante and Hippys Collectables. So please go check out both of their channels. They have great channels with lots of great knowledge and information. Two really nice guys. Thank you all for tagging me. And this mainstream comics tag, I believe it was started by Comic Uno of Dark Avengers Inc. I believe that's who it was. If it wasn't, I apologize. Yeah, they tagged me. I am it. So here we go. First question: favorite ongoing with one main hero. All time, I'd have to say. Even though this is, first off, I want to say I just grabbed what was handy for visual aids, so I was going to see some trades and hardcovers and stuff. But even though this is Amazing Fantasy, this is Amazing Spider-Man, Marvel Masterworks Volume 1. And if I had to pick two favorite ongoing books of all time, I'd have to say Amazing Spider-Man for Marvel and for DC, Batman. Even though I'll complain about some Amazing Spider-Man stories later, I'd say it's probably, my favorite Marvel of all time. Also a big fan of Conan the Barbarian, Savage Sword of Conan, and Swamp Thing, Saga of Swamp Thing from DC. So, question number 2, my favorite team book. This is hard for me to say. I really liked the 80s Justice League series by Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, and Kevin Maguire. But as Carlos Infante pointed out, I think this is a good point. The Justice League, the Avengers seem a little more like a team than the Justice League, but Justice League and Avengers always seem like a lot of really great solo heroes thrown together into a super team. Whereas you had teams like Teen Titans and X-Men and things like that who were always, together. But, I'm obviously a big fan of Justice League and Super Friends being one of the cartoons as a child that got me interested in comics. But I'd have to say Marvel, my favorite team book, was Uncanny X-Men, especially through the 80s and 90s. Chris Claremont and John Byrne's run was amazing. And New Teen Titans. Wolfman Perez can't be beat in my book. Can't mess with them. And some honorable mentions. I also really liked the Elementals from Comico, but they didn't put too many of those out in the 80s. It was by Fables creator Bill Willingham. Also recently, I guess it was probably like 8 years ago, 8 years ago, Marvel did a team book called The Order that I wish they had done more with. I'd like to see where that book would have went had it not been canceled. And currently really enjoying Justice League Dark, one of the big, great surprises, the very few pleasant surprises of DC's New 52. And I want to give an honorable mention, because it was just a miniseries, but Watchmen, one of my favorite team books of all time. And I know a lot of people say that as a story it doesn't hold up that well, but, I'm a little biased when it comes to anything Alan Moore does, but I humbly disagree. And I think this is a great book, and I've read it many times. Great take on the team dynamic. It was just groundbreaking when it came out. So, honorable mention there. But I have to say, favorite teams, Uncanny X-Men, especially circa 80s and 90s, and Teen Titans. Moving on. Favorite hero. I already said Marvel, Spider-Man. Like many people, I have my top two are probably the same as many comic readers, because they've had so many great stories and great people working on them. But Spider-Man for Marvel, Batman for DC, and I'm glad I actually pulled out this soft cover, because I love this Walt Simonson Batman cover to the greatest Batman stories ever told. That is just a kick-ass cover. Unbelievable. I love that. I don't think it's been used on anything else, but one of my favorite Walt Simonson covers, especially Batman. Amazing to me. Also, honorable mentions are, obviously Conan and Punisher, if you can even call them heroes. They're almost like anti-heroes in Swamp Thing. Also big fans of all those books. Favorite villain. Next question is favorite villain. Joker. And I think maybe one of the reasons I like Batman and Spider-Man so much is, to me, they clearly have the best rogue galleries in their publishing houses, by far. So their villains are so interesting. So my favorite DC villain, definitely Joker. Also a big fan of Deathstroke, who, again, you could almost consider him an anti-hero the way they've been writing him more recently. But Marvel, I'd have to say Magneto. I always liked the way they wrote Magneto. Such depth with that character, and with the way mutants have been persecuted, it not only gives them some depth, but it gives them a little more humanity and understanding. You can almost sympathize with his position a little more than a lot of other villains. So, Joker, Deathstroke, Magneto. And Doctor Doom kicks ass too. He's just can't be overlooked. He's the one villain. One of the things I like about Batman is, even though he doesn't have any powers, when he shows up to Justice League, the shit stops. They don't mess with him at all. And that's kind of how Doctor Doom is as a villain. Even some heroes, some hardcore heroes, get shook when he shows up with a plan. So he gets a mention too. Question 6, favorite event. This is a hard one. So I'll go, old and recent. Honorable mentions go to Contest of Champions. It's one of the first events I remember reading. I really liked it. And I also remember the Fall of the Mutants storyline through the X-Men books I really liked in the late 80s. Lots of good issues where they fought the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Remember really digging that one, and I think Mark Silvestri drew a lot of those issues. But old school and probably all-time favorites, DC Crisis on Infinite Earths. Another masterpiece by the Wolfman Perez team. It's just hard to mess with. And for Marvel, said it before, Infinity Gauntlet. This and the Thanos Quest are just incredible. From Jim Starlin. Jim Starlin's one of my favorite writers too. And George Perez, oddly enough, George Perez drew my favorite event from from each company. And I do have to say, World War Hulk, Planet Hulk, was probably my most favorite. My favorite event of the past 10 years or so. One of the best, things they've done with the Hulk in a long time. Great writing on that. Planet Hulk was incredible, and when they brought him back to Earth, they did it in a huge fashion with World War Hulk. Great stuff. You're looking at a horrible book, because here comes my first rant. Least favorite book. And it's hard to say, but I know one of the least favorite books, besides the Spider-Man Clone Saga, that I kept buying the book through it even though I hated it, was this. I'm a big Deathstroke fan, and New 52 Deathstroke, they decided to put one man alone on Deathstroke, and I shuddered when I got this book in my pull box. When I saw that name, I knew that not only would he somehow screw up a battle between Lobo and Deathstroke that I would normally probably shit a gold brick to see, but I knew when I saw that name on there that equals people canceling the book, dropping the title, and this book's going to get canceled. I was like, great. First Deathstroke solo title since his like 1989 series or whatever it was, 1988, 1989. And it's going to be canceled. And sure enough, not too long after this book was canceled due to another one of Mr. Liefeld's crappy efforts. Thank you, Mr. Liefeld. Number 8, book that I read that most others hate. And I don't know if people hate these, but I picked out books that aren't popular and most people don't like. And, in the 90s, I would have said Jonah Hex, because nobody really liked him. And I did. I read his old stuff. And then Tim Truman did some awesome miniseries with Jonah Hex. And Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray took over for, I guess now, going on about 10 years straight with working with the character and no one else. And they've really built this character back up to where a lot of people care about Jonah Hex now. So I can't really say him. So I'll say DC's Warlord by Mike Grell. Character I've always liked that I never thought got his due. Not very popular. This first series went over 100 issues. But every time they've tried to relaunch it since, it just can't sustain any sales and it gets canceled. And they've had some strong artists and strong writers relaunch it and it just doesn't last. Even brought Mike Grell himself back. So, Warlord from DC is a book that I read that most people don't. And in the 80s, ElfQuest was popular, but in the 90s, it wasn't, big superheroes, big guns, violence, gritty reboots. They were all the rage, and ElfQuest was kind of considered hokey, and I still liked it, and I didn't care because I was able to pick up most of my run at ElfQuest dirt cheap, 50-cent bins and stuff. So there's another book that I read that most others don't like. And if I had to go back, I remember, in like middle school, two of the books that some of my friends made fun of me for reading were, as far as DC goes, was the ongoing Robin series, which I liked, whatever. And from Marvel, Spider-Man 2099, which I maintain it's the best book of the 2099 books, and it's not that bad of a title. It's not that bad of a read. I've seen worse. Whatever. Number 9, my least favorite. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost forgot about this. This is a recent book. I won't say people hate it, but a lot of people aren't reading this. And it's a Monsterverse book, Flesh and Blood, and it's released in these volumes that look like trade paperbacks. It's not released as comics. And I'm a big horror fan, and I love the Hammer horror movies and Christopher Lee as Dracula. And if you're a Hammer horror fan, you will love this book, because it's pretty much a direct homage to that. But here we go for my second rant. Question 9, what's my least favorite event? And I'm going to give you a few. And like I said, even though Amazing Spider-Man's my favorite book, for some reason they always feel like they got to put Spidey through crappy gimmicks. And this was one that hurt the comic industry as a whole. It was so bad. The Clone Saga, Maximum Clonage, with the Scarlet Spider in his crappy blue hoodie. This disgusted me. This is, I went away to college after this, but this is when I put down comics for a couple of years because of this. Because of that. That's what finally got a hole in my Amazing Spider-Man collection. Here's another one. J. Michael Straczynski, who I like on a lot of other books, did 2 of the crappiest Spider-Man storylines. The Spider Totem stuff with Ezekiel, where he just messed with traditional continuity. Oh, you didn't get your powers from a radioactive spider. You've inherited the powers of the Spider Totem from some, I don't know if it was Aztec or Native American religion. And he brought in this guy who looked like he should have been from the Hobbit town, from the Shire, Ezekiel, who had Spidey's powers and was extra crappy. Then he did this one, which everybody knows and hates, Sins of the Past, where he just disgraced Gwen Stacy's memory, said she cheated on Peter with Norman Osborn, and they fathered superpowered kids that are coming to kill Spider-Man now. And man, did Straczynski piss me off for messing with Spidey's continuity and 30, 40 years of established continuity down the drain. And I did not like it. And the problem is, gorgeous art on these by Mike Deodato. That cover is incredible. So, it's this beautiful art over this turd of a storyline. This one really pissed me off. Again, by a great writer, and again with beautiful Mike Deodato covers. Peter David wrote The Other. And this was so bad. Spidey gets stung by this spider lady, can't remember her name, goes into a cocoon in a coma, and comes out with spider-based powers, like he has these spider stinger thorns that come out of his forearms, and he mutated into more half-spider. And this storyline was so poorly received and so crappy that they had to come up with another crappy storyline to undo the effects of the other in the Spider-Man universe, and they came up with this crap, One More Day, which Mr. CDC, I think, pointed out, Mr. CDC Camp pointed out recently how this was just BS, and it completely goes against everything Spider-Man stood for. He basically, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know this, but it pissed me off because you see Mephisto on the cover. Aunt May dies again, because she's died a few times, but Aunt May dies, and Spidey sells his soul to Mephisto, and alters his continuity so that he never met Mary Jane. That's the price. But he sells his soul to Mephisto to save Aunt May's life, which, like Mr. CDC Camp said, it's just so against the character. And it was a crap storyline to fix another crap storyline. So there's that. And the final question, I want to say too, before I get to this, least favorite event. There's a couple that I wouldn't say are my least favorite, but I think they're wasted opportunities that I need to mention. House of M, Siege, and DC's recent villain month, were wasted opportunities. They had so much potential if they would have done them right to be incredible stories. And they were just letdowns in my opinion. So I just wanted to mention that too before I go on. Love to get a little opportunity to rant about stories that pissed me off after I paid money for them. Final question was a no-brainer to me. Favorite comics jail, Arkham Asylum. And if you've never read this hardcover, pick it up, by Grant Morrison, Dave McKean. Crazy stuff, if I can get it in focus. But the thing about Arkham Asylum, maybe it's not a jail. I'd like to get you in focus there, please. Maybe it's not a jail, but it kind of is, because criminals lose their rights and get thrown in there in prison against their will and they can't leave. Excuse me, and it houses by far the most vile villains of the Batman universe. And it's such a legendary piece of the Batman mythos that in stories like Arkham Asylum, the asylum itself almost becomes like a living, breathing character. And just incredible read here. And many other Arkham Asylum, Living Hell. There's been a lot of good storylines involving Arkham Asylum, including some Swamp Thing stuff. So you may not consider it a prison. I would consider it a prison, and it's definitely my favorite comics jail. So thank you. I think it was Comic Uno for this good idea. Thank you again to Hippys Collectables and Carlos Infante for tagging me. After I upload this from my phone, I'm going to go back on my computer and put links to everyone. Please check out, I'm sure if you haven't checked out Hippys, please check his channel out. If you haven't checked out Hippys Collectables, I'm sure you have. But also please check out Carlos Infante's channel. Carlos is a great guy from Mexico City, and he should have a lot more subs than he does. So please check his channel out, check his vids out, sub his channel. And finally, to close things off, sorry this went so long, but I had fun ranting and raving. The final thing, you have to tag 3 other people who have to answer these 10 questions. And I always feel bad doing this thing because I don't like leaving anyone out. I always feel guilty. So I apologize. I'd like to involve everybody if I could. But I know these 3 guys will probably tag 3 of our friends as well, because we're all a big community here. So the 3 people I'm passing the mainstream tag on to answer these 10 questions in a video themselves are Fool Killer 5150, Comics Quest, and Vin Crew 12,000. Tag, you 3 are it. Everyone, thanks for watching. Comic Uno, thanks for doing this. It's a cool idea to learn more about everyone in the community. Thank you again to Hippys Collectables and Carlos Infante for tagging me. Please check out all their channels. And everyone, take care of yourselves, and happy comic book reading.